What's up, everybody? I'm Nico. I co-host Simply Bitcoin. I'm going to talk about something that you guys probably did not know. 2021 was one of the most important years in Bitcoin's history. But not, Bitcoin became legal tender. Everyone knows that. Public companies put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. It wasn't that. 2021 was the year of the Great Mining Migration. The Chinese Communist Party banned Bitcoin mining within its borders. The hash rate, which represents an estimate of the computational power actively mining Bitcoin and process securing Bitcoin, just fell off. 50% of the hash rate just disappeared. Because of that, Bitcoin had one of the largest difficulty adjustments in its history, 28.6%. That difficulty adjustment created one of the most profitable times in Bitcoin's recent past to mine Bitcoin. With profit comes incentive. It's such a powerful incentive that I actually hit a buddy of mine that lives in mainland China, and I asked him, "Hey, bro, are you worried about the hash rate?" And I swear to God, this is what he said. He said, "Nico," which apparently is how you pronounce my name in Mandarin. He said, "What doesn't kill the honey badger makes it stronger. They've tried banning this 5 times before." Absolutely blew my mind. Someone 1,000 miles away was speaking the same language. That incentive created by that difficulty adjustment incentivized people all around the world to plug in those S9s, to plug in their mining, out of the pursuit of profit. So in a completely decentralized manner, people all over the world pursuing profit, the hash rate of Bitcoin decentralized. Most of it went to Canada, most of it went to the US. And not only did the hash rate recover in 6 months' time, now it's already breaking an all-time high. So think about that for a second. No coercion, no central party, no boss telling those miners to be plugged in. It was people just pursuing profit. Absolutely beautiful. And if you guys, I'm assuming most of you don't mind, if you're just looking at Bitcoin, you wouldn't have noticed that the Bitcoin network lost 50% of its hash rate. What other network could do that? None. Only Bitcoin could do that. I'm going to talk more about the Great Mining Migration and the unintended consequences that came as a result of it with these awesome panelists. I'm going to give them very awesome introductions. We have Roy. He mines in the former Soviet Union countries. We have Ben. He is the Chief Mining Officer at Bitfarms. And last but not least, we have Zach. He is the Content Lead at Brains. So first question to you, Ben. As a result of the Great Mining Migration that I just talked about, we have 35% of the estimated 35% of the hash rate is located in the United States alone. Does that worry you?
No, not at all. I think getting the hash rate out of one country like China is very, very good for Bitcoin. And when you look at Bitcoin being, effectively the monetization of energy, you want to look to the areas where you have huge amounts of electrical infrastructure and resources. And if you want low price electricity, you've got to look for that electricity and energy that's being underutilized. And so the United States has the second largest amount of electricity production in the world, second only to China. When you're leaving China, it makes perfect sense to be going to the United States, especially after they spent, 3-4 decades outsourcing all manufacturing abroad. So all those power plants still exist, all those transmission lines still exist, transformers, all of that stuff still exists and is not being utilized. Bitcoin miners are the perfect solution to fit that gap. So highly positive for Bitcoin, I think, to do that. And once you are in the United States, it does cost you a little bit more to get set up there, but the stability of the legal jurisdiction means that you're actually going to be able to rely on your operations long term. As someone who operated mines in mainland China back in 2015 and 2016, that is not a place that I can operate long term sustainably. The United States and Canada is.
I want to jump in on that a little bit to add some context, though, because we have, creeping up on 40% of hash rate in the U.S. now, and something to keep in mind is we'll never see, and I'm sure you'd agree, we'll never see a repeat of something like China hash rate centralization again. So even though there are significant advantages to operating farms in the US and in North America in general, that sort of era is over. Like China's hash rate centralization was sort of an elephant in the room for all Bitcoin narratives for most of Bitcoin's history. Critics love to cite this sort of centralization narrative. And China killed that with its latest ban, and it will never happen again anywhere else. Like there's too much money on the table, too many people having access to too much mining hardware and cheap power in every other jurisdiction in the world that you may see like between Canada and the US close to 40-50% between the two jurisdictions. But then, of course, you have provinces and states and all sorts of sub-jurisdictions in both countries. You'll never see another country with over 50%, even close to 50% of hash rate ever again in Bitcoin's history. Thanks to China.
Bullish. So, look, I'm forced to cover the news, to do well on my show. And what I've started to notice is in the last, I would say, year, 2 years, right? You have articles from The Guardian, you have articles from the New York Times, and not to mention the World Economic Forum, which has tremendous influence around world leaders. They've all been highly critical on proof of work. Now, the Bitcoiner in me is telling me that's because they can't control it. And it's funny because they're advocating for proof of stake. Does that concern you guys at all, right? We're definitely entering the then they fight you stage. These are powerful institutions that have tremendous amount of influence. Does that keep you up at night a little bit?
It's like obviously it's never fun when people talk badly about like an industry you care deeply about. But the glimmer of hope, or it's more than a glimmer of hope. The bottom line here is all of those narratives come from basically 2 or 3 data sources, and maybe 5, half a dozen people constantly saying the same talking points. So it's a mirage. The data, sort of pseudo-academic studies that they cite every single time are, riddled with problems in the methodology that they use to sort of arrive at this. And then it's just, blown so far out of proportion with proposed bans and endless op-eds about how bad proof of work is. But it all comes from 1 or 2 pseudo-academic sources. So no, I'm not worried at all because while facts may not always win in the short term, they definitely win in the long term. And the facts are on our side. So you can publish as many op-eds or propose as many bills as you want. We're going to win, and you can regulate yourself out of our industry if you want to, but you're never going to kill our industry.
Absolutely. So also developing, I would say you're getting little, hints here and there. You have CNBC articles saying oil executives, energy executives are meeting up with Bitcoiners in these secret conferences, but of course they don't mention the energy companies. I'm going to pass this on to Ben, and I think this is going to change everything. How long until energy companies start mining Bitcoin themselves? Because I feel like it would make sense for them.
That's already happening, and it's been happening for a couple of years now, but at small scale. Back in 2017 and 2018, you started having oil and gas companies, mostly in Alberta, starting to pick up the practice. And now it's spreading everywhere. You'd be surprised by the kinds of companies that you would be, or that are actually running Bitcoin mining pilots. You'd be surprised to hear those names. But you don't need to press release something that's so immaterial. So if you are Exxon or BP or something like that, and you set up a Bitcoin mining operation, you can do that completely under the radar without really letting anybody know. But when you look at, again, the monetization of energy, and again, that ESG narrative, which is a narrative, there is no better technology in the world than Bitcoin mining for reducing emissions at oil and gas sites. So if your goal as a nation state or whatever is to reduce emissions, there's no better technology than flare gas mitigation turning into Bitcoin mining. This is a brilliant solution to the problem, and it's the only technology that does not rely on a public subsidy to reduce emissions. It's a free market.
And I really fundamentally believe this, it actually incentivizes green energy, which is something that they want, right? Without, essentially how it works now is government subsidies, right? It's what makes them profitable. Bitcoin potentially makes them profitable, period, without the need for government subsidies. Roy, I'm going to pass you a question. you mine in the former Soviet Union countries. What advantages do you find mining there versus mining in the West?
First of all, you have great talent at an inexpensive rate. You have a lot of, when I started mining, I was looking for old, ugly buildings with a lot of power, things that people don't understand. So we actually mine in one of our places is a former Soviet missile bunker. It's not a launch vehicle. It was actually a storage thing. It's about a 300,000 square foot building that doesn't have any snow on it, and we're very, very far north in some of the places that we have because we generate so much heat. So you've got great talent. Energy can be a bit difficult. Can be a little bit difficult there, but with renewable stuff, you do a mixture of solar and wind and things like that. You can get your price down pretty well.
Awesome. So, speaking of former Soviet countries, Kazakhstan has around 11% of the hash rate. And of course, if you're just a user of the Bitcoin network, you would not have noticed. But it was not that long ago where Kazakhstan had this revolt, this populist revolt, and the government of Kazakhstan actually shut down the internet. So overnight, 11% of the Bitcoin hash rate literally disappeared overnight, right? So, and I think that as Bitcoin continues to go up in market cap and it takes away government's ability to manipulate people through monetary policy, I suspect that this might be a potential attack vector. Zach, I know you wrote an article recently about Kazakhstan. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Kazakhstan's a good example, sort of following China's ban of like the persistent evergreen threat of geopolitical change that affects miners everywhere. Kazakhstan was like a, kind of a destination spot for miners throughout Bitcoin's history with some tax advantages, cheap energy, lots of cheap energy. And then after China banned mining, lots of all sorts of sizes of Bitcoin mining companies, but lots of big miners shipped a lot of machines to Kazakhstan. You saw a surge in that region's hash rate. And sort of over the past 6 to 8 months, you've seen the Kazakh government sort of wrestle with this and change a lot of policies and propose even more changes that make things significantly less friendly for miners. Obviously, not to the scale of a full ban like China. But the internet outage and then changes in sort of energy policy and tax incentives just underscores the fact that you, in the same way you would hedge your Bitcoin custody across a couple different wallets, and obviously if you need quick access to it across hot and cold wallets, miners are becoming more and more aware that you need to hedge your hash rate by distributing it across a variety of geopolitical locations. And in some cases, that may be all within the same hemisphere, it may be spread out all around the globe, but the geopolitical risk in every jurisdiction is always there. And that's not to say the US will copy something like China. Those are obviously two very far apart ends of the spectrum, but the risk is always there, and you have to hedge against that risk no matter where and with what size you mine. Ben could probably speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, what I would say is that the technology exists to safeguard your operations in this way. We're selling energy online, digitally. So instead of having something like a nat gas pipeline or a crude pipeline to transmit your energy to a market, we're doing that on your fiber optic line, right? Having a backup system enables you to have all that connectivity. So Blockstream has satellites just for this kind of purpose. Starlink has satellites just for this kind of purpose. You can have a satellite internet connection, and it cannot be shut off by your local, ISP. So when you're generating hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin in revenue, why would you not have a small insurance plan in the form of a satellite connection? And, if you have that, that circumvents that entire problem entirely.
Absolutely. And I know that, shout out to Samsung, Adam, they've been working on that at Blockstream. So, yeah, obviously the Kazakhstan miners didn't prepare. I have a question for you, Ben. Like I said earlier, China has been hostile towards Bitcoin, right? They banned Bitcoin mining. In fact, recently a law just came out where Chinese Supreme Court said that if you were caught transacting in Bitcoin, they'd give you 10 years in prison, which is, that's when you're winning, right? They wouldn't do that unless you were winning. Most of the major mining manufacturers are located in China, right? Do you see that as a potential point of weakness?
Well, there's a couple things there. The first part of this is, the idea of what China's really against. China's not against Bitcoin. China's against people circumventing capital controls. As a Chinese, you are limited to about $50,000 sent out of the country legally. That's not enough to send your kid to school in the United States. So how are you going to do that? They've done all sorts of things to try and restrict those capital flows out of the country. And if, most notably in 2017, I believe it was, at the beginning of 2017, they banned the withdrawal of Bitcoin from exchanges. So you could go to a Chinese exchange, you could buy your Bitcoin with RMB, and you could withdraw it to your personal wallet or to a foreign exchange and sell it for that currency. And that's how people were circumventing those capital controls. They put in a policy at the beginning of January that you couldn't do it for Bitcoin and Litecoin, which were the big ones at the time. What happened was Ethereum just took off like a rocket, and it went from about $7 up to $430 in the span of a couple of months because of the surge of volume going through Ether as a way to circumvent capital controls, right? So this is something that is a long-standing goal and policy, and they're against Bitcoin as a capital, circumvention technique. But that being said, there's a lot of things that China is against, but they still allow to be manufactured and exported out of their country. Famously, fentanyl is not allowed for use in mainland China, but it is all manufactured in mainland China, right? That they can be against Bitcoin mining in mainland China and still produce those products and export them overseas because it's good for GDP and everything else. So I don't think that is a big risk. What I would say, though, as a North American miner, I'd rather work with a North American equipment supplier. So it would be easier for me working with a counterparty in the same jurisdiction, with the same languages, the same time zones. That would be a lot easier for me. I do think we'll see a lot of disruption from North American mining companies as all this mining hash rate comes over to America. We saw Intel recently with their announcements. I think there'll be one of a number of companies that come up in the United States and start to compete in this space.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Intel miner just announced a couple days ago the second version. It's almost on par with the XP, right? With the Antminer S19 XP. Question for Roy. Roy, in the last couple of years, I don't know if this is different than 2017, but I would say in the last year, 2 years, we've seen a huge rise of what I call pleb miners. Some people call them home miners. Do you think that that's just part of the cycle, or do you think that this time is different?
Well, the numbers are a bit different. So I think that will cause the pleb miners to stay in a little bit longer. I think that, which is very good for the network. I think we're still going to probably see. I don't think that the bear market will be as deep, but we're probably going to see a little bit longer. And I think that people who have made it through one or two turnings are really sort of expecting this. Some of the new people may fall out, but that's just sort of the way that's the way that the network works. So there should be some opportunities for people that are sort of bulwarked, ready for that.